Real conversations with real people that have chosen a life of positive impact in business and community. This is Leave It Better with Brandon Trammell. My friend Donnie Hill, welcome to Leave It Better, man.
Thanks, man.
I'm really happy to have you here.
It's really, really good to see you.
Yeah. When I extended the invite to you, I was not surprised, but very pleased with yeah, absolutely. When are we doing that? I really appreciate you coming out, man, because, we've known each other for a few years now, and I've had a chance not only to get to know you as a human being, as an individual, but I've also had the pleasure of being able to kind of follow your business journey and all the things that you share on your channels. And it's amazing to me that there is not more of your kind of leadership development being shouted from the mountaintops, because it makes absolute sense to me. So to kind of like unpack what restorative leadership means and why it's important for business leaders, business owners, and pretty much any human being.
Yeah, it's been a really fascinating journey to come to this idea of restorative leadership. Intellectually it makes sense, but I think really embodying it for myself and learning the different ins and outs of what it means has been, it's taken a little time.
Well, as it should, I suppose.
Yeah.
So what does restorative leadership mean?
Right. So when I think about leaders inside of corporations or entrepreneurs or small business owners, some are, elected into the role or forced into the role,
sure,
and others intentionally step into it. And so I think there's this concept or this idea of like, okay, I'm going to build my own thing, or I'm going to lead this community. And there's this passion and fire to do it. But then you get into it and you realize all of the other pieces that people don't normally talk about. So if you're building a business and you're thinking about, where's the money going to come from to pay rent, or where's the money going to come from so I can invest more in my business? Now, do I talk to my significant other about that? Are they on board with that vision and that idea? And so there are kind of these other human aspects of life that end up getting thrown into the mix when you are a leader or when you are a business owner. And so after a while, because we either sweep those things under the rug or keep them in their own little closet, that ends up taking up so much mental energy and consequently physical energy, because you're just trying to maintain some level of normalcy in addition to building this thing or doing this thing that you've never done before. And so when I think about people and their energy levels, we have to do energy management. And it's a finite amount. And then if you don't have any kind of practices to kind of help you refuel and energize you, or to be around a community of people who understand what your world is like, then all of this stuff just becomes depleting, and there's no external replenishment. And so when I think about restorative leadership, I'm really thinking about it as, if you are a business owner and a leader, I don't want you to give up on your dream or your vision, but how do we pour back into you so that you can continue to go? I was a pole vaulter in college. And what I tell my leaders is, my coaches intentionally built in rest and recovery days so that I would be restored. I'd have the energy to go and do vigorous workouts or rigorous workouts again, and to do it on an ongoing basis, right?
As a part of the process.
And that is a part of the process. And so when I'm working with leaders and and entrepreneurs, I'm looking at them through the lens of, you are an elite athlete to me.
Yep.
I want you to be in this game for a long time. And in order for that to happen, you're going to have to eat differently. You're going to have to get rest. You're going to have some days off. But I think sometimes we get so enticed by, like, this thing that I'm building is so exciting. It's gonna take off, or let me just spend one more hour, and then it becomes 5 hours.
Real quick. That happens real quick. 100%.
And so the mindset shift of thinking like an elite athlete, people seem to be taking that in a little bit more, and they can hear it, versus me just saying something, hey, I'm interested in your physical well-being or your mental health.
Yeah.
Because I've tried that, talking to them from that road too. And
which those are important things. Yes, those are important things.
But if they don't have any kind of relationship with not having their health, right, or they just power through, and that's the norm for them, then they're like, I'll be okay. I'll be okay. So when, one of the aspects of restorative leadership is pouring back into, but I think the other part of restorative leadership, and this is where a lot of your work I'm excited about, is about how do you restore within the family unit, or how do you restore within the community, and what does that look like?
Man, this topic, this conversation of managing our energy, of checking in with ourselves, our physical body, our mental state, it seems to be coming up a lot for me right now in conversations with me. And it is, I used this analogy when I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, actually here on the show, Weez Duran. And it's like the cell phone battery, right? And when you've had that phone for such a long time, right, a couple of years, and we're constantly on it, so we're depleting that battery, and we're recharging it, right? But after a couple of years of using that phone, the life of that battery, the efficiency, the efficacy of that battery is severely diminished. No matter how charged the battery is, it could be at 100%, but the health of the battery itself makes it so that nothing on the phone works right. Like, some of the apps will work, not all the time, and like it's so. But that's an analogy I think that most of us can connect to, because you're right. Not a vast majority of our population doesn't have any relationship with health concerns, whether that's physical disability or, mental illness is obviously really, really present, right? Whether it's discussed or not, it's there rampantly. But most people, we're invincible, right? Until we're not. Until something puts a chink in that armor, we believe, I'll be fine, right? I can run at 100% for 10 hours, and then go home, and I'll sit on the couch, I'll rest. But there's no restorative practice, and this is what I love about your work. This is what I love about what you bring to the world, because it's really critically important for us to rejuvenate and replenish and rest, so that when it comes time to, strike again, so to speak, right? Yeah. We have that energy. And a lot of people just don't think about it that way, especially, the folks that you work with, which are, these are our business leaders. These are people who run companies, have big teams. And, it came up as well in another conversation, in an episode for the show, that we just, if we're not able to monitor, manage, and rejuvenate, right, replenish our energy, then we're never going to be able to bring our best to any one of those situations, whether it's personal or professional. So I love the work that you're doing, and I love your perspective and approach on it. So what brought you to like nervous system led, restorative leadership? What brings a man to such a place to be doing that work and supporting people in that way?
Yeah, I think there were many pieces.
Sure.
So I think part of it was my own journey with mental health and depression and suicidal ideation at 20.
Right.
Part of it was being an athlete. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon for the longest time. So my plan going into college.
Oh, we love plans, don't we?
They're so great until you just kind of uproot all of them. So I was planning on being an orthopedic surgeon. My goal was to go to the 2008 Olympic trials.
Okay.
And then go to medical school, open up a rehabilitation clinic, and then work with elite athletes.
Nice.
And then I got to biochemistry, and it's like, no.
Sorry, what?
You will not. That will not be your lot in life. So at that time, it was probably at the height of my depression because I was 19 or 20, dealing with my own health issues. I was in and out of the hospital. I was dealing with depression, but didn't want to talk about it.
Right.
And then realizing, this plan that I had is not the plan that I want. Right. And ended up having a severe panic attack, but I thought it was a heart attack. And so my coach had to rush me to the hospital. And after I got to the hospital, they hooked me up to the EKG, did a whole bunch of tests. And the very last healthcare practitioner that I saw was a psychiatrist. And he said, "Do you want to stay at the hospital?" And I just looked at him for a minute and I said, "I think that would be a good idea." And I checked myself into a hospital for a week. And that week, I tell people that's the week I got my humanity back, because I was like, I can let all of this shit go.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. And I let go of the idea that, maybe I'll go to medical school. I told my track coaches that I wasn't going to come back. And then I was also figuring out, like, what am I going to pursue as a career?
Right.
So there was kind of that life moment. And then fast forward to when I was 25, I found out about a cancer coaching certification program. So I thought, maybe that'll be my way of getting back into healthcare. Yeah. I don't have to go to medical school.
12 years of school later. Yeah. Okay.
And then, I'll see where this takes me.
Sure.
And so I got into the program, and the week after I got into the program was when my mom got her diagnosis. So my mom was my very first patient.
Talk about practical application.
Absolutely. I was in the middle, I think I was in, the middle of the training when my mom was about to have her surgery. And so the conversation that we had was around death.
Yeah.
And she said, "What if I don't wake up?" I was like, well, this wasn't exactly where I had planned on going in this conversation, but it is a possibility.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Well, how do you know you were going to wake up today?" And she just laughed and she said, "Well, actually, I didn't." I was like, "All right, well, let's just assume that maybe tomorrow you'll wake up after surgery." And after her being my first patient, like, I realized that I can have this conversation with anybody if I can have it.
I mean, you can have that with mom. I'm pretty sure you could handle it with anybody who's not mom.
Yeah.
For that matter.
So I ended up working with an integrative medicine team for about 3.5 or 4 years, and was realizing that a lot of the patients that I was working with and their caregivers, all of their energy was just being drained by either actually going through treatment or for the caregivers taking care of their loved one.
Yep.
And it's like, all right, well, the cancer coaching tools really gave me the emotional tools to deal with the journey.
Sure.
And some of it I did with the body because of my background, and I was a certified personal trainer as well. And then the last piece was when I got into business coaching. I was going through a program, and that's where I met Irene. She was one of the guest speakers. And I remember watching her on stage and listening to her presentation. I was like, I have no clue what this means, but this is just really interesting to me. And so afterwards, I went up to her and said, you know what? I really loved your presentation. Thank you for sharing the information. This is great.
Yeah.
And I didn't do anything with it.
Right.
But just kind of followed her in periphery, and we became friends. And in 2020, maybe in like September, I kept coming back across some of her videos. I was like, oh, yeah, this makes sense to me. I can just sit here and listen to you in the background, and I can feel like some level of calm and peace.
Yeah.
Even if I don't fully understand what you're talking about.
Right.
And I think in November 2020, I made the decision to invest in one of her programs. And it was like a 21-day nervous system thing. And I said, all right, well, I'm going to do it. And I think maybe within the first 2 days, my whole kind of perspective about the nervous system shifted because her education is so good and it's simple to understand. She can teach it in a way that's simple to understand.
Yeah.
And so as I was going through the program and doing some of the practices myself, I'm like, this is amazing. Like, therapy is good,
Sure.
but this is different.
Yes.
All right. And I think what made it different was that it was helping me come back into my body where I could feel like all of the tension and the stress and the pain just being held.
Yeah.
And so over the past couple of years, I dove into some of her other programs, and I just finished with one of her educator programs to continue diving into her work.
Right.
And I said, this is the missing piece. Because I think as leaders and entrepreneurs and business owners, they get that there's just going to be some times where they need to go and do things just because they have deadlines to meet. Right?
Sure.
And some of them, they understand the importance of therapy, but therapy is great for talking things out.
Yeah.
But they aren't necessarily listening to what's happening in the body, and the body is a lot slower, right? So people are like, oh yeah, my back hurts or my knees hurt and all these things. And I was like, that is information. That's your system saying, hey, pay attention.
Right.
Right. And so now when I think about kind of the nervous system and the role it plays for me in the education that I provide my leaders, it's the foundational piece. Because whether you're in a conversation with someone or you're sitting at your desk, your nervous system is constantly going. It's like, oh yeah, this is safe. I'm looking at this email and I feel like I'm about to jump out of my skin, or I'm getting ready to go into this presentation and I feel like a deer in the headlights. Like, oh yeah, that's your nervous system getting activated. And so I'm really wanting to encourage people to begin thinking about themselves differently and thinking more holistically about their body and their performance and how it's a part of kind of their growth and their sustainability and their presence as a leader or as a business owner. If you go in and you're all beat up,
kind of like an elite athlete, you show up to the game with an injury, you're not going to play at the performance level you did before that injury until it's healed, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it makes absolute sense, and I think if we pay attention, and we're we approach it with an open mind, right? And we think about, wait, maybe there is a connection between the stress or the trauma or the pain that I'm experiencing in my mind, and then I'm finding pain in my body for no other reason. I'm not an elite athlete. I'm not running track or throwing javelins or catching balls or hitting balls or any of that. I mean, I'm 43 years old. Like, if I whip my head in the wrong direction too fast, I might end up. But checking in on our bodies, which is it's our anchor to the physical world, right? It is our expression, right? Our physical expression. And understanding that all the things that are happening in our body they have meaning. They're sometimes have to be decoded.
Yes.
Because some people listening might go, I don't even know what the fuck the nervous system does. Right? I know I've heard the word nervous system, saw it in biology, might be connected to, nerves and sensations in my body. But I mean, that's the limitation for a vast majority of us on like, what implication does the nervous system have on my day to day? I mean, the answer is everything. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Everything. Because it sends signals to, right, every part of our body, our brains, our hearts, our fingertips. I mean, literally every inch of our body. So having that practice, or even starting at learning a little bit about it and understanding at a higher level the function that, our nervous system has. And, I'm sort of compressing it a little bit because there's more than one nervous system.
That is
true. I'm not a physiologist or in any way, human biology is not my field of study. But I have some understanding because I've had conversations with you. I followed your work and others. I mean, there are others, right, that are doing this work and integrating sort of the moderation of our nervous system, right, to sort of experience life more fully. So I can appreciate the fact that you are in a field where people have very little understanding, and trying to, the way that you hold space for people to lean into, a subject that they know nothing about, but are just like, I can't keep this up anymore. I'm a CEO. I can't have these conversations with people that I lead because they might look at me as, inferior or not fit for the role, or maybe they won't listen anymore, or, whatever the judgment, right, that so many of us fear. So for them to be able to have an outlet that is not just talking to somebody, because as you pointed out, the talking is important, and there has to be practice behind that, right? That maybe sometimes therapy is just incomplete. It's very beneficial, but I think incomplete. And so the work that you're doing is, it's just so necessary, whether they know it or not. So
I think more people are coming around.
And I think you're right. I really do, because I seem to be hearing it a lot more, and maybe that's just because algorithms are feeding it to me. I don't know. But it's happening. I'm hearing it on different channels and different spaces and with different people. And so I think you're right. People are picking up on that more, to kind of tune in.
There's so many little idea bubbles that came up as we've been going back and forth over the past couple of minutes. So I think the first one is this idea back to kind of energy management. Like, you hear people, business leaders all the time, talk about ROI, right?
Sure.
And I think about ROE, I think ROI and ROE both are important.
Okay.
And ROE is your return on energy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And so if I can get my leaders to kind of have those two R's in their mind as they build their business or lead their team, then it helps them think a little bit differently about kind of how they interact with themselves or their business or, you know, their teams.
Sure.
I think another piece is, you know, you talked about people's understanding of kind of the nervous system and what it does. And part of the reason why, you know, Irene uses this phrase, non-dumbed down education. And I love it. It was like, yes, you need to know the non-dumbed down version of this so that you have really good theory to understand kind of what is happening with you personally, right? And people's nervous system, everybody's nervous system is different, because you had different experiences and traumas and upbringings and all of the things, and so there's no one size fits all.
Right.
But everybody has a nervous system, so there are going to be some key
similarities.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think when talking about it, part of the reason why I try hard to make space for people is because I want people to make space for me when I'm learning something new. You've definitely done that for me when it comes to financial advising and education. And I'm like, dude, I have no clue what any of this means, but thank you for sticking in there with me. It's like, I'm probably going to ask you this question 5 times over the course of the next 2 months, but
and you'll get the same answer every time.
And I'll get it.
Yes.
But so there is kind of the compassion piece around it and the kindness of like, great. Yeah, I get to talk to you about this thing because 1, you might not know about it, and 2, your capacity to understand it is limited. Right. So one of the analogies I use a lot is the swimming in different pools, right? You have the kiddie pool, you have the regular standard size swimming pool in the backyard, and then you have the Olympic size pool.
Right.
You're not going to take a newborn baby and put them in the middle of the Olympic size pool and expect them to swim.
Probably a bad idea.
Yeah. They're just going to drown.
Yes.
And so I'm like, why don't we take them and just sit them in the kiddie pool, let them play around with the water a little bit, move their hands around in it, get used to it being on their body. And so I think the same is true when it comes to the way that I approach teaching people about the nervous system and how they integrate it into their leadership work or their communication work or their business building.
Right.
Because I know if I share too much, it's going to overwhelm their system because they just don't have the capacity. I'm trying to talk to them and share them this Olympic-sized pool worth of education into this kiddie pool. And so they're like,
overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I have to agree. It's I mean, this perspective, this approach is something that I embody as well, as you pointed out, right? We are all at different entry points. We come with different experiences, different willingness to change behavior, different willingness to learn and integrate that learning into our daily lives and our day to day. So, holding that space is really, we hear it a lot, right? Meeting people where they are and knowing that if we structure our business in such a way that we allow for lots of different entry points, regardless of where you are, right? Then we can really serve in a capacity that folks who don't do that can't.
Yeah.
So just so poignant, man. And it's so critically important. What we need more of in this world, right, is folks with grace and compassion and understanding for one another, right? And I've said this before, and I find myself saying I've said this before a lot. So I've said a lot of things before, I guess. But if we're going to make a better future, if we're going to make a future that is beneficial for all of us to continue existing on this planet together, then grace and compassion and understanding for ourselves is where we start.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I don't have it for myself, if all I do is judge and, put down and question myself, then how could I ever do anything other than that for you or for anyone else? So the practice that you teach people is imperative. And business is the single strongest catalyst for change of anything else that I've been exposed to. Because as business leaders, we have microphones.
Yeah.
And not the kind that we're sitting in front of right now. Megaphones, like we have a stage, we have a platform. People listen. And so if we're saying things that are harmful or damaging or dismissive, then that echoes.
Mm-hmm.
It echoes just as loud, if not louder, when our presence is grounded in kindness, compassion, and caring for myself and for everybody else around me. I'm going to lend you the same kindness and compassion that I lend myself. So where that meter falls, right, has a large bearing. So I can't say enough how important the work that you're doing and the support that you're giving to business leaders is. And one of my big, one of my primary goals outside of my professional practice is creating and being in community with other folks who are in business and understand that a better way is the best way, right? There is a better way to operate in business that considers all the different stakeholders, the community and your employees and, yes, your customers and your shareholders. They're a stakeholder. Yeah. They belong in those considerations. But so does the environment. Yeah. And which one of those stakeholders is most primary tends to have tends to be a large indicator for how we operate.
Yeah.
So when shareholders are the primary, or maybe even the only stakeholder that's really being considered, a lot is left, off the table. So the work that you're doing is just absolutely necessary, and I really appreciate how you show up for people in that way.
Yes. You mentioned kindness and compassion and love and grace. Mm. And if I think about restorative leadership, it is about pouring all of those things back into ourselves as business owners, right? Because we're having to learn a lot, but also pouring it into our teams and pouring it into the communities, we say. And I was talking to one of my mentors who gave me the moniker the Life Maximizer. And this was probably 2013, 2014. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And at that time, that's when I was doing work with the cancer patients. Mm-hmm. And over the years, I've sent her these random text messages just saying, oh, I get it. I get it.
That's what you meant.
I get it. And now I recently had one of those realizations of, look, Life Maximizer means to expand. It means to restore. It means to make quality of living better. And so if you can take that into your leadership practices or your communication practices or your business practices, it puts you in a different mindset for how you interact with people, because you're like, oh yeah, am I going in to harm or am I going in to help make life better? Right? And then you get to make a decision like, well, today I just don't have the resources to not do any harm. So I'm going to go and I need to cuss this then I'm going to come back and woosah and say my amends. And
we'll try again tomorrow.
We'll try again tomorrow.
Yeah. I heard this. They just like that last portion of what you said reminded me of this video, this audio clip that I have seen and heard on Instagram. And it's this Indian guy saying, if you're having a bad day, fuck it. Go home, go to bed, and try again tomorrow. And I'm like, yes, like, dude, that's okay. Right? You can scrap a day and move on. Like, because I haven't rested enough. I haven't eaten enough. I've been in front of a screen for too long. I haven't had enough movement, or, whatever the case might be. I mean, some days are just shit and nothing goes right. And, just like your nervous system and your body send you messages, so too does the universe, right? In our dealings outside in the world, man, it's like, all this shit's going wrong. I think it's just time to go home now. I'm just going to go home and we'll try again tomorrow. Not all of us are afforded that luxury. I am fully understanding of that fact, but some days you just got to say, fuck it. And, go home and rest and restore. So, just this, I hear that guy's voice in my head whenever you're saying that. I was like, oh, I'm going to share that.
I need to have that video.
I'm going to send it to you now.
Yeah. That's true. But I think you just pointed to kind of one of the other concepts it talk a lot about is like the idea of rupture and repair. Right? It's okay for there to be a rupture, but are you going to do the repair? Or have you done the repair?
Right.
Or is the repair scary? And like, I'm not really sure I want to do the repairing, right? And so I think when you're having those hard days, it's important to pay attention to the impact.
Yes.
And if you don't clean up the impact that particular day, is it the end of the world? Maybe not.
Yeah.
But I think it is important to be mindful. I'm like, wow, that really just left somebody feeling pretty awful. Man. Maybe I should go do something. It's
a self-awareness thing too, right? I think there's a big missing link is that so many of us are not self-aware of, so telling somebody pay attention to your body and how that's affecting how you show up for people, they're just like,
what is that?
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And like, I feel this pain in my knee, but what the hell does that have to do with me flipping off that guy driving on the highway next to me, right? Because he was just driving normally, but it got in my way and that triggered me. Like, what is that? What does my back pain have to do with any of that? Well, I mean, as it turns out, right, it's all inextricably linked.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everything in our bodies, and I mean, our brain is in our body, and it is connected to all of these systems that are happening, muscles and all. I mean, so, if we're willing to have an open mind about that, right, and be curious, to the fact that maybe there's information that we don't have that could be really helpful for us, and doing that work, right, with ourselves, for ourselves, and usually even better with someone else, right, with a guide, because we can learn far more when we're guided. It gives us context and things that we can't get when we're learning on our own. It's amazing what can be unlocked. So self-awareness, and I find in spaces, and maybe you can share some of this as well, but I find in the entrepreneurs that I support, a lot of them are, B Corp businesses. They're, very self-aware, very conscious-minded business people, right? Considering all the stakeholders and their impact on the environment. And these are folks who tend to be a little more self-aware, right? I have found in the data, 30 years of data on these kinds of companies, these conscious companies, if you will show you that their profitability, their sustainability, and the sustainability of their profitability is linked very closely to that approach, perspective, and way of operating in business. So do you find that a lot of the folks that you're serving maybe need some more of that self-awareness, or are they self-aware and they're like, I'm realizing there's a problem? Maybe there's a mixture of both, or?
Yeah, they're kind of, I would say, 3 categories across my clients.
Yeah.
There are the individuals who are incredibly self-aware, and they just don't have the energy, and the sustainability piece is really important to them. And so that's when I'll come in and we'll focus more on body practices and really helping them kind of optimize that. There are leaders and organizations who are skeptical. And to be honest, I really enjoy working with the skeptical people, because I'm like, 1, this is going to be a challenge. And 2, they usually end up being my biggest advocates, because I'm not trying to make them wrong, but I'm just wanting them to consider, hey, there could be some other pieces that could be beneficial to you. Right. And so it really forces me to hone my own skills in my willingness and my ability to listen. Right. Because they're like, I don't know. And so I have to be curious.
Yeah.
And that for me ends up being really helpful. Yeah. So for them, I think the conversation there is really helping them understand that, look, I want you to focus on profitability, and I also want you to consider focusing on care and the people, because people are going to build your business. You're building your business for people. So there is this human element that I'm really being a lot more direct about when my leaders come to me and they're saying, oh, we're having talent retention problems or talent attraction problems. People are constantly walking out the door. And my response to them is, of course, because they don't feel like you give a shit about them. So there is no care anywhere in your compensation plan, your business model, your management practices, your leadership communication.
Right.
So people are just hearing the Charlie Brown teacher. And they're sitting in their meetings rolling their eyes or waiting for 5 or 6 o'clock to come and like scrolling on TikTok and Instagram when you're not around so they can get a paycheck.
Right.
And that ends up causing harm to the company too. And I'm like, well, what if you were the organization that was known for giving a shit about people, or the organization that was known for helping your employees feel connected to their purpose and do something meaningful? What would it look like if that was your strategy? And so I just had a conversation with a healthcare leader either last week or earlier this week where they were talking about kind of the compensation package and what that needs to look like. And one of the questions that I asked was, well, how about you throw kind of your current way of thinking of it off the table? And what would it look like if you thought of it from the context of what kind of life would my employee like to live? Well, okay, I know they have bills to pay, so they need to make some good money. A lot of them have families, so they probably want to have some quality time with them. They need health insurance. If they have some financial benefits, that's probably important too.
Maybe.
But there might be some other things that they get from having just a simple conversation with their employees around, hey, what's actually important to you? What would make you feel cared for and feel like this is the best place to work?
Right.
And then the two of you can kind of co-create together of like, oh, these other pieces that the leaders have never thought about could easily be integrated into their compensation plans.
Right.
Give their employees what they want and need, and the employer has a deeper level of trust with their employee.
Of course.
Which means now they feel comfortable going to talk to you about more things,
right,
which is then going to give you the information you need to make new decisions about how to keep people in your door.
Radical. I mean, you're a heretic. Heretic. Burn you at the stake. I mean, come on. How dare you suggest such a thing?
And the last, I think the last group, they're the leaders who really, they have a mission, and they are probably some of the most sensitive, empathetic, heart-centered human beings on the planet. And they're trying to build a business. Like, oh, I just want to give it away. I'm like, well, then that should be a hobby. That shouldn't be a business.
That is charity, not business.
Yeah.
Yes.
And for them, it's really about, one, deconstructing all of the narratives that they have around greed and money and being a bad person, all the conditioning we get around what money means.
How terrible rich people are.
Yeah, how terrible rich people are. And their relationship to sales and marketing. And so there's a low level of trust there around those business practices. And there's also not a lot of safety around it. So they're having to learn how to cultivate trust and safety, both with having more money, with being more visible if they need to market their services, and to sales, and being able to have a sales conversation that feels like it's of service, but also allows people to feel kind of loved and supported in the process. And so I'm like, restorative business, restorative leadership, that means doing sales and marketing in a different way. That allows you to build trust and help people feel safe and make sure you feel good in the process. Like, you don't have to keep yourself out of the equation.
Right.
And so much of the education that I do with them is about reminding them, hey, you matter too. Your livelihood matters too. Your enjoyment matters too. And that feels more like belief work and confidence work. So it's really fascinating seeing the different kind of categories come through my door.
Well, what I think was what you just said is wrapped around a concept that I think more of us maybe need to understand or pay a little bit of attention to, and that is enlightened self-interest. If it is, so it's important that we pay attention to nature, right? Because nature operates outside of man's understanding, even like, so those forces, those processes, those natural cycles, all of those things, they all play a part. human nature, just like the nature of any living thing, period, full stop, must sustain itself. Prime directive, right? Everything is in support of self-sustainment, sustainment of family, right? And that's another one of those natural things, right? Procreate and continue the species. But enlightened self-interest, when people, like, I was coached much the same, right? Is like self-interest means greed, the interest of self over all else. That is self-interest. Like, somebody who's self-interested really is not concerned with what happens to other people or other things. But an enlightened self-interest understands that I must earn a living. I must be able to provide food, sustenance, shelter for my family if I have one, myself, and maybe a significant other if I don't. But understanding that in the enlightened portion of that is that as long as I'm not doing harm to those other folks, those places, in effort to sustain myself, then it's win-win-win.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think I really love this concept of enlightened self-interest, right? The flight attendant says it every flight you're on, right?
Yep.
Put your mask on, then help the person next to you if they need it. Because if you're dead, you can't help anybody. And, I equate that to business as well, is, I have to be profitable for me to continue doing the good work that I'm doing. That does not mean that the profit is the most important thing. It's a critical component, because if I am not profitable, I can't keep doing business. And so the good work stops anyway, right? So it has to be profitable, but in a way that considers the interest of others and the planet. So I think you really, you brought that home for me in what you were just saying, is like, we have got to take care of ourselves as we care for others.
When I heard the phrase enlightened self-interest, it made me think about a couple of things. So I think the first piece is the ideas of intention and impact. Right? I think you're right. We do have to think about ourselves.
We have to.
But the part where it becomes the enlightened is, what is my intention for doing this thing? Is it just about me, or is it about, not sharing with them or whatever the place is?
Yeah.
And then what is the impact of that? And identifying the ripple effect. And some people might say, I don't care. It's just
Right.
It's just me. It's just Donnie Island over here. That's all. I'm not in this ecosystem of anything else. Right? And then there is, so there's the constant practice of like, what's my intention and my impact as I continue to pursue my own self-interest.
Yes.
The second part is when one day we were at lunch and you were talking about your origin story of leaving it better. And I shared with you the connection to my origin story was tied to being a doctor and the Hippocratic Oath of doing no harm.
Right.
So I've really been thinking about that since our conversation. And I said, do no harm sounds wonderful. And it sounds so idealistic, but it sounds unrealistic. So I modified it a little bit to do less harm because I'm human. So at some point I'm bound to make a mistake.
Right.
Somebody is going to be negatively impacted by something that I've done. And I don't need to walk around thinking, oh yeah, I'm never going to harm anybody.
Right.
Right. And so there is this element of being more mindful I think when I hear you talk about enlighten, it's like, oh, it's a mindfulness thing.
Yep.
About, am I being intentional? Am I recognizing my impact? And am I doing less harm? And if I'm doing more harm, then maybe I shouldn't do this practice. Or I should figure out another way. And do I have the resources and the capacity to change the way that I do things? Because the train might already be moving. I'm like, I guess I'm just going to have to let this run into a few buildings right now because it feels...
Sorry.
Yeah, I'll go and clean. I'll send you a check.
Yeah.
I'll send you a check.
Oh, man. Donnie, this is why I think we get along so well, because we understand each other.
Yeah.
You and I come from very different backgrounds, my friend. I mean, I did not grow up in Alabama. And, obviously our life experiences are vastly different to a large degree. And yet, nonetheless, here we find ourselves having crossed paths through common friends, common collaborators, and common interests. And it's so heartening to me to know that the practices, the thoughts, the perspectives that I've been fortunate enough to come to and be in now have given me the ability to cross paths with and share commonalities and friendship with people from vastly different lives and upbringings. I want everybody who is a business leader or in one way or another, whether owning a business, leading a team within a company, or starting out or just running their solopreneur endeavor, to be able to have access to you and the great work that you do with people. So where can the listeners find you? Where can my folks find you?
Yeah, they can go to my website, www.thelifemaximizer.com.
Okay.
Or they can go to my Instagram, and it is @thelifemaximizer. So those are the two best places.
Good. Because I think, one of my main missions is to share stories of people, not only of how they got to where they are, but what they're doing that is contributing to leaving the world a better place than the way they found it. And that means lots of different things, and it shows up in lots of different ways. But the result ultimately, or I'll say the intent, is ultimately the same. I want to contribute to something greater than myself, and I want to live a life that is happy and safe and content and rich with experience. And I think any business leader that works with you is going to come out the other side of that work better than they found you, or better than when they found you. And I'm just so glad to know you. I'm glad to be friends with you, for that we get to run in common circles and maybe someday we'll even be able to collaborate together, which I look forward to that.
The ideas are already percolating.
I had a couple spawn as we were sitting here talking. So I really appreciate you coming out, man. Thank you for making the trip into the studio, and thanks for sharing your story with us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, brother. If you like what you've heard, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For even more inspiration, head over to our YouTube channel, Leave It Better with Brandon Trammell, and subscribe to watch videos from podcast episodes, gain insights around getting right with your money, finding joy in everyday life, and achieving contentment in a crazy world. And remember, wherever you go, whoever you're with, whatever you do, always aim to leave it better than you found it.